Hello. I realized when planning to drink wine to begin with, I didn't think about how I was going to place that down when there is no table beside me, but I thought it would be a great time. It was evening and I had wine and I was like, you know what? It would be a fun time to do a tag. I'm going to be doing a tag that's called Say One, Drop One, and I think this was originally done with characters, but I saw it done with books on Jesse the Reader's channel, and pretty much rather than taking favorite books or anything like that, I took a bunch of my 3 stars. If you go to Goodreads or anywhere, 3 stars is definitely the most common rating I give, and it's also the most mixed rating. It's also the books that I don't talk about a lot because often I don't have strong feelings about them, or I have very mixed feelings, or I have complicated feelings. So I think this will be a great time because it's not like a favorite going against a favorite. It's books that I feel like 3 can really range in how much I like them or dislike them. Pretty much how it's going to work is I have this Montreal mug, and I'm going to be taking 2 names out of here, and I'm going to be debating them. So our first 2 are Bewilderment and Frida Kahlo at Home. This is very interesting. I think I might have even moved Bewilderment down to 2 stars after reading this. Oh, yeah, because I was writing this while I was finishing Bewilderment, and the end of Bewilderment I hated. So this is a 2 stars. So this one's really easy because Frida at Home is a book that I really, really love. I don't know why it's 3 stars, probably because it doesn't have a lot of writing. It's a collection of photos by Giselle Ferran about Frida Kahlo at home and pictures of her in bed. Frida Kahlo was disabled and had many chronic pain and mobility issues throughout her life, and I really connect to her through that, and I really, really love her. I've read several poems based on this collection, so yeah, I'm sorry, Bewilderment. I didn't like how you dealt with autism, and I thought that you dealt with a lot of things really badly, so even though some parts were beautiful, there is no chance here. The next 2 that we have are I Am Messenger, and this is by Marcus Zuzak, and then The Rune of Kings. Ooh, this is where it gets really tough. So The Rune of Kings is an epic fantasy novel. I think it came out in 2018. It might have been 2019. And it is a very complicated story because we pretty much have this one boy who is telling his story about being a child and growing up and kind of like the chosen one. But then we also have this shapeshifter who is telling his story now. Actually, it might be compared. Either way, we have one first person and one third person point of view of the same person at different times. And it's one of those books where like I feel like I could really love it if I went back and read it. It had a lot of interesting things going on. It just never completely captured me. On the other hand, I Am the Messenger by Marcus Zuzak is a book that has complicated feelings. I DNF'd it, I think, 4 times. This is, a sister book to the book Thief. Not a sister has anything to do with it, but it's by the same author. It is a book that I hated until the last third, and I really liked the last third. And I don't really remember. I remember there was a reveal that made it worth it, but I don't remember what that reveal was. All I remember is the beginning that drove me crazy. I think I have to go with Rune of Kings, because Rune of Kings is the one that I'm more likely to reread, although I do definitely see myself rereading both of these in the future, because I feel like I would have different opinions, because this one I would understand more, and I Am the Messenger, I might know from the beginning that I would like it. Our next 2 have similar issues and confusion. So we have One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and then we also have Moon Knight, and it's by Jeff Lemire, and it's a comic series, and we actually just got the trailer for the Marvel series, which I'm excited for. And both of them deal with mental health, and don't always deal with mental health well, but definitely deal with mental health. If I was to take away all context of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and just read it, I think that it would win. Moon Knight I really, really enjoyed. I love how meta it was. I loved how we kind of looked at all of these different characters. So the main character has dissociative personality disorder, and he has many of the different ones. So one of them is like a business elite, another one is a taxi driver, then he has his kind of vigilante person who is Moon Knight, and he has the powers of an Egyptian god. It is one of those books where there's a lot going on, and it's like really meta and really interesting, but also not a complete favorite. Like I remember reading it and being like, this is fun. But you know what I'd rather be doing right now? Reading Batman. I am really excited for the series. However, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is incredibly problematic in, the representation of mental health is really rough, and the representation of women is horrendous. If you were just to read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and write a paper on it, the primary theory is women emasculate men. And yeah, and about all of these women in power, and like pretty much mental health is mostly the scam is just women making men feel terrible and just like making them feel smaller and smaller and smaller. Interesting enough, the character of Chief is one of the best. He's a very large man. I think he's supposed to be like, I don't know, 6'7" or something like that. And he is indigenous, and he was taken off his land and stuff like that. And obviously it's not first person, but I do think out of all the representation, like there's a fair amount of racism against the Black community and stuff like that. But interestingly, from a white author, there was a fairly comparison about how him being stripped of his land, him being stripped of his family and stuff like that had a really bad negative feelings on him, and that he felt very, very small. And like, you can talk about mental health as, you know, people feeling shame and insecurity and stuff like that, but that's not all mental health is. And the way that they talk about women and they talk about Black men just as the use of women to hurt white men is just, no. I enjoyed parts of both of these while also not enjoying other parts, and I think that I have to go with Moon Knight. Okay. Oh, these ones could not be more different. And we have the Guernsey Literary Potato Peel Pie Society and Shatter Me by Tahira Mafi. So the Guernsey Literary Peel Pie Society, oh my goodness, is one of my favorite movies. I watched, I think, 4 or 5 times. I absolutely love it. And I think from that, I could not have read the book and like loved it completely. That's a lie. Like, there are some times when you love an adaptation, but sometimes like you just want it to be a little bit more like it. And I do want to reread this and give it another chance because it is one of my favorite movies. But for me, it was just like a really solid book, but it didn't like do anything special. It had interesting history, but I'd already watched the movie so many times at that point. Well, Shatter Me, I think, is an interesting novel. I read 7 Shatter Me and 2 novellas in the week before I met Tahira Mafi in 2019, and it was a great time. I think that her writing, especially the crossing out, it had a lot of things to do with isolation. Later, she wrote about a large expanse of sea and her experiences of Islamophobia. I've always wondered if Juliet's feelings of the fact that she can't be around people without hurting them, or that people view her as some kind of bomb that is about to explode or kill people, is kind of how her dealing with Islamophobia. I could be totally off for that. That's just always been my fan theory of kind of how it looks like. And I think the mental health and how, you know, she kind of crosses out words and she is kind of retelling her own story is very interesting. I don't love the series overall, but I do enjoy lots of it. And I think that I have to pick Guernsey Literary Pie Peel Society because I just really, really love it. So now we have 2 of my least favorite from series. So first of all, we have Queen of Nothing by Holly Black, the last book in the Cruel Prince series. And then we also have The Sea of Monsters by Rick Riordan. I love Rick Riordan. Look, there is a shrine to Percy Jackson. This, I think, is completely, I think that this is almost unanimously accepted as the worst book in his series. And I do really, really enjoy it. And I really, really enjoy Queen of Nothing. I thought that it was too short and didn't deal with the full amount of things. And The Sea of Monsters does have a lot of character development. We have some Annabeth and Percy moments. We have Tyson being introduced. We have all of these good aspects, but actually the Clarice parts. Clarice might win me over with that. I really like Clarice and her character development in here. I like Percy Jackson more. I like The Cruel Prince and The Folk of the Air really well too, though. It's like such different periods of my life. Like, trying to compare what I loved at like 14 versus what I liked at 21 is an interesting comparison. I think it has to be Sea of Monsters, though. Goodness. I don't know how to compare these at all. So we have Furia. And this is a very interesting book that I read as one of my first in the year. I actually really enjoyed it. And the more that has sat with me, the more I've liked it. This is about a girl who is Latinx and Middle Eastern. She lives in South America, and it's her story. She is in a world where they used to outlaw women not being able to play soccer and stuff, and she plays soccer. And it does such a great job of looking at her and her mother and how generational trauma and how the scars of our family affect us and stuff like that. And I thought it did such a good job. We have Dropkick Romance, which is a queer poetry collection by the partner of Amanda Lovelace. I enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. It talked about 2 relationships, one with Amanda Lovelace, their wife, as well as their previous partner, and kind of abuse and goodness and how those kind of correlate to looking at how trauma comes into people's lives and how you kind of get back together and they make you feel like crap and all of those things back to forth and like the cycle of abuse, while also falling in love on the other side. And I really appreciate this. It's a very underrated book. One of my friends let me borrow it and I really enjoyed it. Dropkick Romance is good, but I don't know if it stands out as much from any other poetry book, when Furia is a story that I've not seen very often. So I'm going to choose Furia. I'm getting really good comparative ones. So I have The Enchantment of Ravens and also The Deep. And these books are both fantasy books. The Deep deals with, we have these children of women who were enslaved and then died in the waters on the transatlantic slave trade. And it is such a good book. It is a book that I feel like I would have to reread to fully understand. Part of it is narrated by a we as a collective, and it's very hard to tell the difference between that versus the person, because we have this person who has to hold the trauma of an entire society, and only once a year or once every 7 years maybe they're actually able to release that, and it's like pretty much driving them insane because they have so much trauma to lay on. Meanwhile, The Enchantment of Ravens, which is a lovely story. It is about the girl who is painting an elf. She's an artist, and she paints emotion into his eyes. And the Faes aren't supposed to have any emotion, so she goes on the quest, and it's fun, and like it is such a great book. Both of these could easily be 4 stars. I really recommend both of them. The Deep, I think, gets the edge because it is a story that has a little bit more nuance below it, but Enchantment of Ravens is such a great book too, and The Deep has so many interesting discussions that I would really love seeing. Those ones were great comparisons. These ones are even harder. Sourdough and A Wrinkle in Time. Sourdough is about a girl who is in the Tech Valley. She is kind of like living on these weird non-food things as they work too many hours in Silicon Valley and stuff. A Wrinkle in Time is a 1976 novel that is kind of based toward children, but in a similar vein. It has science fiction, it has fantasy, where you go on a quest to see their dad with her and her brother and her kind of love interest. And it's a very interesting series. I definitely have to give it to Sourdough, though. I think Sourdough has interesting explorations of community and intergenerational friendship. And because, like, they call her the #1 eater because she goes to this place that has bread, and then the people that own the restaurant get deported, and she takes up a sourdough starter and makes sourdough. And this thing just has great connections and memories. I read it as one of my very first books in the beginning of the quarantine, and I had a great time with it. So I think that even though I love A Wrinkle in Time, it has great angsty 13-year-old people, it's not the book that I'm going to choose. This one is really hard. Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Sheen McGuire. And then we also have The Test by Sylvain Nouvelle. And this one is an exploration of how our justice and immigration story, this one is set in the UK. It begins with a man who is immigrating from an unnamed Middle Eastern country, and he has to take it for his whole family. And things are starting to happen that are wild, and it's kind of a little bit like Black Mirror-esque in that. And then we have Down Among the Sticks and Bones, which it's this beautiful kind of grown-up child story that's like Narnia or Alice in Wonderland or Dorothy, and all of these stories where they go into different worlds. And this one is the first one that is actually set in one of those worlds. This is why it's so hard, because I actually really, really enjoy both of these. But they're very hard to compare as novels. So maybe you should read The Test, because you've probably heard of this one before. Our next one is Batman, The Long Halloween, and then The Book Thief. This is a thing. Okay, The Book Thief I wanted to love. I wanted to love so much, and I just was not that impressed. But there was like, the standards were like through the roof. So maybe if I reread it one day, I will like it. Although I'm more likely to read I Am the Messenger before that. Batman The Long Halloween is one of the early Batman stories, and I really, really enjoyed it. As scandalous it is, I am going to read The Long Halloween. This one has a serial killer who's killing on Halloweens. It's before kind of we're getting introduced to the fact that there is no super villains yet. It's all like the mafia and stuff, and these people keep on dying, and I really, really enjoy it. I'm really surprised it's 3 stars. Like, I could reread it and this could be a 5-star. Like, some of it we didn't get to see enough, but I really enjoyed it. I feel like this choice alone could be political critique, and it's You and We Were 8 Years in Power. And one of them, this is Essays, that is a collection of essays about the Obama years, and some of them are really good. Some of them are questionable. Like, he starts the book with talking about Bill Cosby for like forever, and like how, you know, the man isn't a perfect like black idol and stuff like that. But he was already under like arrest for like all of his crimes before this book was published, and I have no idea why we started this book with that. You know, we also have You, which is one of my favorite shows, but not one of my favorite books. There's just so much description of bodily fluids. I just watched the 3rd season actually, but I think that it's a beautiful critique of the nice guy critique and how we look at characters and how people feel justified it, and how if you take out Joe like murdering people, it looked like a rom-com. Well, the book is way more sinister. It's way more thrillery. It's way more like dark, and I don't like the book as much. So, but I also didn't like everything about We Were 8 Years in Power. Like, some of it was really good, but like some of it didn't age as well. Okay, I think I'm going to choose We Were 8 Years in Power just because I like the story of it. I'm excited to read more Ta-Nehisi Coates books, but this one wasn't the favorite out of it, even though it had a lot of good things to say. Ooh, okay, so these ones are interesting. My Antonia and You Exist Too Much. So I read both of these this year. My Antonia is a story that is by Willa Cather, and it is set in the 1870s. She is a woman that is a friend of the narrator, and she is from Bohemia, and she is an immigrant, and it's her story. And meanwhile, we have You Exist Too Much, and this is a story about a Palestinian woman who is bisexual, and her mother begins with talking about like just not acknowledging and being kind of terrible to her for her sexuality. And then it goes really strong into like, I don't want to say autofiction, but it felt very autofiction-y, where like it's very, and I love autofiction. We really look at vignettes of her story where she goes to a sex addiction place. My Asian readathon actually has my full thoughts about it, but pretty much my thoughts were about the fact that it felt I don't mind stories that aren't resolved, but this book just felt like it ended and we never got to see any growth or any destruction. We just continue to see her go into bad relationships and then like not really improve and like continually looking for love. It's a really sad book. I I have like I don't have a lot of like remembrance of the actual plot events, mostly just of her going with people that aren't treating her very well and then her not treating them very well either. My Antonia is not a perfect book, but as it went on, I liked it more. And then I read a few Will Cather since and I've really enjoyed them. So I'm really excited to go back and maybe read My Antonia, but I think that it's a really good book and My Antonia is winning. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue and the Outsiders. I have mixed thoughts about V.E. Schwab overall. I think that I tend to kind of middly like her books. I believe I rated this 4-star and then improved it down to 3. I liked a lot of aspects about Addie LaRue, but it didn't like capture my love. Like I wish it had spent more time in the past. So it's about this girl who made a deal with the devil in like the 1600s and then or 1700s. She is immortal, she never dies, but she is not remembered. So as soon as she like goes to the washroom or they fall asleep or any of those things, they completely forget her. Then we have The Outsiders, which is commonly referred to as one of the first YA books. It was published by a 17-year-old C.E. Sinton, who is, I believe, named Susan. And it tells a story about these kind of stories about these boys who are very young and kind of combined between the Soses, and they are the kind of upper elite people. And then we have the Greasers. Are they called the Greasers? And they're kind of the gang life, and it's about family and stuff like that. Addie LaRue is a hard book to remember. Like itself, I remember the atmosphere, but not a lot of it. And The Outsiders is a book that I feel like I haven't read in forever. Oh, this is really difficult. I think I'm gonna give it to Addie LaRue. I remember more of it and I liked it, but I really want to reread The Outsiders. I've had lots of time and I think I'm going to end, and we have Far from the Madding Crowd and Between Shades of Grey. Oh, these are Between Shades of Magic. This is Darker Shade of Magic. Okay, that makes it a lot easier. Darker Shade of Magic is also by V.E. Schwab, and I liked it but didn't love it. Far from the Madding Crowd, I watched the movie and it has like a love quadruple and I hated it, and then I read it and I liked it. And I've enjoyed reading from Thomas Hardy since. So I think it's going to go to Thomas Hardy and Far from the Madding Crowd. Thank you so much for joining me on this. I hope you had fun. I have not been filming very lately. I have been in a lot of pain. So hopefully this was a nice ease into filming again. If you would like to do this, you are tagged. Hopefully you have a great time. Happy reading and writing, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.